Breaking news! The season hasn't even started yet, but the warning signs are already going off in South Florida. And no, that's not an exaggeration. An entire sector of the Dolphins roster could be about to jeopardize the team's real chances of fighting for a Super Bowl. I'm talking about something that many people are ignoring, but that could be the Achilles heel of Anthony Weaver's defense and, by extension, of Mike McDaniel's entire ambitious project for 2025. You know that feeling of déjà vu, when a problem repeats itself year after year and no one does anything about it? Well, it's back, and worse. What you're about to hear now is a detailed analysis of the most vulnerable sector of the current roster. And believe me, there are veterans who haven't played at a high level in more than 5 years who are considered starters. There are second-round picks who could be traded before completing 2 years in the league. There are undrafted prospects who have become the face of the position for lack of a better option. There are players who shouldn't even be on the roster, but are fighting for a spot as if they were CB2. All this in a group that, according to experts, could be the worst the Dolphins have had in a long, long time. But before I tell you everything that's going on behind the scenes in Miami Gardens, make sure you've already hit the like button if you've been a Miami Dolphins fan for over 20 years. It's always amazing to see passionate fans from all generations here. If possible, comment like this: "Go Dolphins! My heart bleeds aqua and orange." Now hold on tight, because what comes next will leave you wondering about the board's decisions. Straight to the point, the 2025 cornerbacks room is surrounded by uncertainty, bets, and, unfortunately, many unanswered questions. The comparison that is going around on social media between the current group and the worst position groups in recent years is not without reason. The concern is real, and when we say that the current CB2 perhaps shouldn't even be on the roster, it speaks volumes about the level of risk the franchise is taking this season. Kader Kohou is currently the best name on this unit, a player who exceeded all expectations after arriving as an undrafted free agent from Texas A&M Commerce. With an aggressive style, molded into a press man, he found space in the NFL and has been evolving even with the rotations of defensive coordinators, 3 in 3 years. Now, you finally have the chance to work with the same system for 2 years in a row. But still, when Kohou is your best corner and you consider using him as CB1 playing on the outside, it's a sign that the roster is unbalanced. He did well in the last weeks of 2023, but his consistency is still unknown. Now, hold on tight. Artie Burns is the CB2 today. Yes, that's right. The former Steelers first-round pick who hasn't played more than 300 snaps in a season since 2018. Since 2019, he's only started 14 games. In 2023, in Seattle, he contributed more on special teams than on defense. At 30 years old, he would be the typical CB5, that locker room veteran you activate in emergency situations. But on the Dolphins, with Greer in charge, he's now second on the list. And what about Cam Smith? What should be a young prospect, picked in the second round, has become a red flag. He had 2 stints on injured reserve in 2023 and only 133 defensive snaps all season. Chris Greer, in fact, made it clear, we're not going to hold his hand anymore. Either he makes a leap now, or his days may be numbered. And even with a dead cap of approximately $1 million, a trade is starting to look like a real possibility. Cam Smith's situation is emblematic of the kind of failed gambles that have marked Greer's tenure in recent years. And it doesn't stop there. The depth at the position is filled with names with no guarantee of production. Storm Duck, Jason Marshall, Ethan Bonner, Kendall Sheffield, B.J. Adams, Isaiah Johnson, many of whom haven't even played significant snaps in the NFL. The evaluation of the group: a sufficient veteran-level starter, Kohou, a CB5 prospect, Burns, several players with incomplete evaluations and no certainty that anyone there will develop into a reliable piece. For those looking ahead to the Super Bowl, this scenario is alarming, especially since cornerback is a premium position in the league. Unlike the problems the Dolphins have faced in the past with tight ends, guards, or running backs, positions that are easier to camouflage with good coaching and other strong players on the roster, the weaknesses at cornerbacks directly affect the way the entire defense needs to operate. More conservative coverages, less blitzing, dependence on a pass rush that needs to be dominant all the time. Any mistake, any damage, and the system falls apart. And here is the most frustrating point for the torturer: why wasn't this unit reinforced with a reliable name in free agency? Why, once again, did time choose to bet on inexperienced or declining players? The answer has a name: Chris Greer. He prioritized other areas and left this unit completely vulnerable. And now we are one signing away from perhaps avoiding collapse. If a starting-level cornerback isn't added before the start of the season, the defense will enter with a time bomb on its hands. Let's go! And here's where things get even more critical. Because when you compare this 2025 cornerback room to the few units the Dolphins have had in recent years, it's clear that we're living in a time of high alert, especially since it's such an impactful position on the field. Let's go back in time a bit. Remember the 2023 tight end group? It was a horror show. Durham Smythe was the top name. The best-case scenario would be considered a good backup. Julian Hill, Eric Saubert, Tanner Connor, Tyler Croft, Elijah Higgins, all names that, honestly, didn't command any respect. But just look at the difference. Tight ends, no matter how bad the room is, you can still put together an efficient offense if you have dominant receivers and a competent QB. In the case of cornerbacks, any mistake there completely exposes your defense, even more so when you're facing quarterbacks of the caliber of Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, and Lamar Jackson. And let's not just talk about the names. The structural problem is bigger. The Dolphins have a defense that relies on the pass rush to compensate for the weaknesses of the secondary. This means that if the front four doesn't pressure the opposing quarterback, the cornerbacks will be exposed, and exposed badly. Against offenses that prioritize quick RPOs or that have physical receivers, this room as it is a recipe for disaster. And Mike McDaniel, as much of an offensive genius as he is, can't control what happens when his defense can't get off the field. The 2022 season showed us that with the linebackers, Jerome Baker was the only player with a decent level of skill there, surrounded by the likes of Landon Roberts, Channing Tindall, Duke Riley, and Sam Eguavoen, all with limited roles and no ability to cover tight ends or running backs in passing situations. The result? Baltimore ran as he pleased, Justin Fields did as he pleased, and Josh Allen was a machine against this defense. Now imagine that kind of exposure coming from the cornerback side against offenses with elite WRs. It's the kind of thing that decides the season before it even gets going. And if you think that's an exaggeration, let's look at the numbers. The current cornerback group has only one player who can be considered a starter at a sufficient level. Kohu. Artie Burns shouldn't even be CB4. Cam Smith is an enigma who may not last on the roster. Storm Duck, Jason Marshall, B.J. Adams, all odds, none certain. Ethan Bonner has passed Cam Smith at the top of the depth chart in 2023, but that says more about Smith's disappointment than about any extraordinary merit on Bonner's part. And here comes the irony of history. In years like 2019 and 2020, yes, the Dolphins had even worse groups, like the 2019 tackles with Jesse Davis, Isaiah Prince, Jamarcus Webb, and Julian Davenport, or the edges with Charles Harris and Taco Charlton. But these were rebuilding years. Not now. Now the team is, theoretically, in its Super Bowl window. And that's exactly why this weakness at cornerback is so frustrating. The roster was built to compete. The defense should be elite, but there's a glaring hole in the very position that's hardest to hide on the field. And why is this happening? Because Chris Greer didn't do his homework. He knew Xavier Howard wouldn't be back. I knew Cam Smith didn't have the trust of the staff. And yet, he opted for marginal names or late draft picks. It's unacceptable. If he had been fired after the humiliating elimination to the Chiefs in the playoffs, as many demanded, we might now be discussing the arrival of a reliable name for CB2. But instead, we're trying to convince ourselves that Artie Burns can hold up. Spoiler, he won't. The scenario today is this. If there's no urgent impact signing, the team runs the risk of throwing away the talent accumulated in other areas due to a negligent decision on defense. And the AFC, my friends, does not forgive weaknesses. A hole this big in the secondary is going to be exploited every week. You could have Javon Holland playing like an all-pro. You could have Jaylon Phillips healthy, Bradley Chubb pressuring the QB. If the cornerback doesn't hold up, it's first down after first down. And this type of wear and tear takes its toll